Good morning, everyone. My name is Allison David, and I'm the CEO of the Claymont Community Center. Welcome to our 70th anniversary, our celebration of the 70th anniversary of peaceful integration in Claymont High School. I'd like to take a minute to thank... I hardly started. I'd like to take a minute... to welcome distinguished guests that we have in attendance here today. United States Senator Chris Coons, State Senators Sarah McBride and Kyle Evans-Gay, State Representative Larry Lambert, Lincoln Holler from the Brandywine School District. He's in the back there, I see him. There's a guy with a great hat on, Josh Bowles from the National Park Service. Dr. Lynette Edwards and David Wilk from the Hockessin School 107. I think Gary Hutt from the Howard High School Alumni Association is here. I have several of my board members from the Claymont Community Center here, so thank them. And our guest of honor, JOAN Anderson, class of 1956. So most of us are familiar with a case we hear as Brown v. Board. It was the 1954 Supreme Court ruling that ended school segregation. We learned about this when we were growing up as the case in Topeka. However, the full name of the case is Oliver Brown et al. Versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. So we've also heard et al., like that abbreviation. It's a Latin abbreviation, and it means and others. So those and others are pretty significant. And the fight for integration was happening across the country. And we're here today to celebrate Claymont's role in that story. In 1950, the only high school open to African American students in the entire state of Delaware was Howard High School in Wilmington. This meant that African American students had to literally travel past this school and go 20 miles round trip to Howard. The parents sought legal counsel from Lewis Redding, a prominent and first African American attorney, who urged them to seek admission to Claymont High School. Their children were denied, and in July of 1951, Redding filed a lawsuit seeking their admission. At the same time, other important cases were happening in Delaware, at Howard High School, at Hockessin Colored School number 107. More broadly, this fight was being litigated across the country in Somerton, South Carolina, Farmville, Virginia, Washington, D.C., in addition to Topeka. In April of 1952, Chancellor Collins J. Seitz, the presiding judge of the Delaware Court of Chancery, directed the immediate admittance of the African American children into Claymont High School. His decision was appealed, but upheld by the Delaware Supreme Court. Based on Chancellor Seitz's decision, Claymont High School prepared to admit 12 students in September 1952. On September 3rd, the Claymont Public Schools Board, and you can see up here, take a look, Claymont Public School up there, called the Attorney General like every hour because they were waiting for an official mandate. They received a call very late that night from the State Board of Education giving them verbal permission for the children to be enrolled. On September 4th, the African American students attended the first day of school and walked through these doors behind me. On September 5th, the Attorney General called Henry Stahl, the superintendent of Claymont Public Schools, with instructions to send the children home because the case had been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Henry Stahl and the entire school board defied that order. They allowed the children to stay at school. They were the first African Americans to legally integrate in the 17 states that allowed school segregation. That was 2 years before Brown. This story of integration is truly an example of the community coming together in order to integrate. The story demonstrates the bravery of so many people. I want to share some thoughts from Judge C.J. Seitz. He's the son of Chancellor Collins J. Seitz, who rendered the decision for integration. He said, "I'm disappointed I cannot attend the 70th anniversary event in person, but wanted everyone to know how important my father's desegregation decisions were, not only in 1952, but today as well. He was a man of extraordinary moral courage and foresight, who saw the hypocrisy of those who claimed to revere the United States Constitution, but failed to put into practice the promise of equal protection for all U.S. citizens. I know in this time of great division in our country, he would be calling for renewed attention to civics and to remember that we are all our brothers and sisters' keeper. Events like today's are critical to keep in the public eye those who stood up in the past, that we might encourage those in the future to be willing to take courageous and unpopular stands to preserve our democracy for future generations." I am pleased now to introduce students from the Claymont Elementary School and say a thank you to Brian Horn, the 5th grade teacher who has been so helpful in getting the kids prepared. We've asked the students to read an excerpt of Chancellor Seitz's order.
I conclude from the testimony that in our Delaware society, state-imposed segregation in education itself results in the Negro children as a class receiving educational opportunities which are substantially inferior to those available to white children, otherwise similarly situated.
I conclude that the state, by refusing these planters admission to Claymont solely because of their color, is violating planters' rights protected by the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Great job. The students from Claymont Elementary School have also prepared artwork celebrating the Claymont 12. The original students admitted were referred to as the Claymont 12, and they are really the true civil rights pioneers. We're going to celebrate each one of them today. I'm going to read their names, and the young people are going to hold up their sign. So I think we can hold applause to the end, but we want to take a minute to remember and celebrate the Claymont 12. So we'll start with Merle Anderson, Carol Anderson, Joan Anderson, Louise Belton, Bernice Bird, Elbert Crumpler, John Davis, Spencer Robinson, Robert Sanford, Styron Sanford, Almina Short, and Mirtha Trotter. You guys can have a seat. Thank you. Great job for the Claymont Elementary School students. So we are honored today to have one of the Claymont 12 here with us. It is my pleasure to introduce Joan Anderson, Claymont High School class of 1956, for some remarks. Joan earned, I'm going to give you a little bio. Joan earned a BFA from Boston University in 1960. She's had a thriving career in business and the arts. She currently lives in New York City and jumped on a train yesterday to come down for our event. Two of her sisters, Joan and Merle, were also members of the Claymont 12. I have to say, on a personal note, I've had the privilege of spending a lot of time with her, and it is really one of the greatest moments of my career to spend as much time with her. So, Joan, come on up.
Hi. Good morning. It's good to see you all. I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. I enjoyed the children yesterday. I spoke to them. We had a good time, didn't we? Yes. Okay. Okay, so I'd like to share my story about the integration of Claymont High. My family grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. And, of course, Wilmington was segregated like the other cities in the segregated states. But there were some residential areas that were integrated, and my family lived in one of them. So at least my family had some opportunities to spend time with other races, which helped later on. So then we moved to Ardencroft. I think many of you probably know the three Ardens: Arden, Ardentown, Ardencroft. Well, my family moved to Ardencroft. The local chapter of the NAACP called my father and said, "Do you know any of the black families who would like to move to Arden?" And my father said, "Yes, we'll move." And so that's how we moved into the Claymont School District. At that time, the Belton case was already going strong because we moved in, summer of 1952. So the case when we moved was in the appeals court, the Delaware Supreme Court. And we moved there in time to be a part of it. It just the way things worked out, the timing of everything, because we really should not have been part of a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. But because of the timing of everything, what happened, as Allison was said, before the case began, the school board invited the children from Claymont to come to Claymont High School. And they said yes, but this was illegal. So the board of school board in Claymont did some things that were illegal to attain integration. What they discovered was both races wanted integration. And looking back now, the other four states, none of the races wanted integration. But Claymont did, and they decided to fight for it. They do whatever was necessary to achieve integration. So they got together and decided that the parents should come and apply, which they did, and they told them, well, we're going to turn you down, so they knew what was going to happen. And so then you're to go to the Board of Education, and they will definitely turn you down, and then the lawyers will take over from there. And that's what happened. But the background of the case is the unity between the two races at that time, which continues to this day, and I was sharing that yesterday. It's the unity that they wanted integration. They were going to do everything they could for it. So when the decision was to integrate from the state Supreme Court, Claymont said, okay, we're going to integrate now, because that was the mandate, that you have to integrate now. And so we're taking everyone who's in our school district, and that included two of my sisters and myself. And so we became part of the Belton versus Gebhardt. I think we started with 7 students from Hickman Row, and now we had the Claymont 12, as most of you have heard. So we were part of that, but there was a problem because, as Allison was saying, we needed a written mandate to attend Claymont, and they weren't sending it to us. So on September the 3rd, Mr. Stahl, the superintendent, decided illegally to enroll us anyway. So we were in Claymont on September the 3rd, being enrolled into Claymont, which was against the law, but anyway, that's what they did. And so there was a conversation going back and forth. Finally, we got a verbal mandate after we were enrolled, which did make it legal for us to attend school on the 4th. So we went to school on the 4th. I mean, things were really good. It was quiet, so there were no police officer. The press wasn't there. We just simply went to school, and we were very well received. And I mean, it was just amazing how well things went. And I was there 4 years, and things continue to go well there. We had very, very few issues or problems, which I'll explain what they are. But anyway, we just were very active in all the activities, the sports, whatever there was, we were involved in it. I joined the Glee Club. Unfortunately, I learned that I couldn't sing on key, but I stayed and just kind of pretended I was singing. But anyway, then I joined the basketball club for women, and never got to really shoot the ball because in those days, just to explain, women were allowed to run up and down the basketball court. And so I played guard all the time, so I never really had a chance to play forward. But anyway, I saw the gym yesterday and was pointing out to Alice and see that's where I had to guard and didn't get to shoot the basket at the other end. So anyway, there were good times there because we were learning to get to know each other. We were learning that we could get along with each other because the parents were for integration. I mean, most of them, as far as I know, were for integration. And so we really had a good time. We enjoyed ourselves. My two sisters were involved in music, and my sister Carol and I were involved in softball. Our last year there, we had a championship season. We won the state championship, but that was because we had a new coach. And she was like the coaches of today, you know, where they holler, scream, yell, jump up and down. They made us run around the track, which they didn't, you didn't have girls running around the track in those days. You just didn't. But we had to run around the track. And all the things that she, made us do in order to become a world-class team. And so we realized after a while, we're winning games. So we ended up winning the state championship. We did have a couple of incidences. One involved the softball team because we had a team from another state, a white team. They refused to come and play us. I remember it really felt bad at the time. We all felt bad about it. But we just huddled together, in unity, and we just said, look, we have to move on. They forfeited the game, and as I said, we ended up winning the state championship anyway. So I was telling the children this yesterday that the boys team that year, the baseball team, they had a perfect season also. They lost all of their games. And I think this is the sign of the times. This is the way the things were. So they made the girls' softball team play them so they could say they had won a game. But this really happened. So anyway, they didn't beat us by much. But I remember being slid into, run over, spiked. I mean, it was. But anyway, we showed that we were a good team. So there were a couple of incidences that happened both with my sisters. My sister Carol, a boy was taunting her, and so a school teacher heard it, went over and just slapped the boy. And then he just turned around and went back to teaching, and nobody thought anything about it. In those days, the teachers could get away slapping the children if necessary, but not today. I wouldn't suggest it. But anyway, that was another incident. It was minor in that it was dealt with like immediately, and no one ever tried that again. The other incident was with my oldest sister, Merle. She plays the piano, and during graduation, the students were to come into the room and go single file and go double file down the center row. And the boy who was supposed to walk down with my sister Merle, he suddenly ran off. But the boy behind him suddenly just stepped up and took his place. Now the board saw what was going on, and they decided not to have him go down the aisle together. And the way that they handled it was when the diplomas were passed out, his was blank. Of course, they did give it to him later. So there weren't that many incidences there that those were minor, compared to what's, has taken place, later on. But I learned so much. One other incident, and it's not really an incident, but when Howard High's football team came to play Claremont, everybody wondered what side of the field we would sit on. There were 11 of us, and we went into the stadium that day, and we walked over to the Howard High side, and we just waved to some of our friends that we still knew. And then we looked on around and came back and sat on the Claremont side, because we really believed this was our school now. We were acclimated to it. There was such unity. There were a lot of good things going on for us. We got a good education. So we felt that this is where we belonged, on the side of Claremont. And I'm glad all 11 of us made that decision on our own. So it was a really good decision. Now, did I have any issues or problems outside of the Claremont area, the Claremont High School area? Whenever we went out for events outside of the school area, I always was a little afraid because I didn't know how the rest of the community would receive me, but it turned out that all the times that I did go out to events with the rest of my classmates, I was well received, so we really didn't have any problems that way either. The unity expressed itself when the football team in Claremont went to another state, played another team, and after the game, they went to a local restaurant to get something to eat, and the waitress there refused to serve the black students. So the entire football team just got up and left. That's how Claremont, that's a good picture of how Claremont was and how it is today, because I can see that in the young people. But Claremont paved the way, I think. It gave us all not only a good education, but it taught us things. It taught us things about learning to get together and support each other, and to work together in unity and to help each other. That will always make a difference. Even for the young people I was speaking to yesterday, you always make a difference in your life if you can love people, and help people. I use the example of in New York, we have a lot of homeless people, and sometimes I'll speak to some of them, just chat with them, or sometimes give them $1 or maybe something to eat, just acts of kindness and all. But it just taught us things that we need to know, being a student from Claremont. It taught us things that helped us later on as we went forward. I went to Fisk University for 2 years, and I have to admit, that was the first I had been in what I called a deep South segregation. Really wasn't quite prepared for that because of living in Wilmington, which was semi-segregated, and then Arden School, which was, and then also Claremont. So I had to adapt to another way of living, and so things went well there as I learned, and then also I graduated from Boston University and eventually came back to New York to study acting, and I did do some acting in soap operas for a while, and I switched careers and went into math, and then I ended up where I am now at my job. It's a branding design company, and so I can say that because of my background in Claremont and the people there who worked so hard for integration, that it helped me in my life later on. Okay, thank you. Oh, one other thing. 3 years ago, 24 of us who lived through the Brown case wrote our stories in a book, and I'm leaving this in the library here. But each of us tells our story, and we find it very interesting. There were several from each of the 5 states that told their stories. It's sponsored by the Brown Foundation. Cheryl Brown Henderson is responsible for all of this. So you can always go online and view it and print it. It's an educational tool, so it's free. And then you can also go to the Kansas University bookstore and buy it for the cost of the printing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joan. It is now my pleasure to welcome United States Senator Chris Coons. Senator Coons has been a wonderful supporter of telling the Delaware story about integration, and we are really pleased to have him here to talk to you about some exciting legislation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for a chance to be with you. Allison, thank you. Allison, thank you for the Claymont Community Center, for your work here, and for the ways in which we are gathered to remember history, to confront our past, and to lay out our future. And to all the students who are here from the elementary school, give us a wave, can you please? It's great to be with you, the students from Claymont Elementary. And to the students who stood so well and managed to keep their hands up and hold these beautiful portraits high, give them a round of applause too, would you please? Joan, it must be a thing of joy for you to be with us here and to remember these important moments, these critical developments, not just in Delaware's history, but in our nation's history. And we are so blessed to have you with us and to hear from you about what the experience was like being one of these Claymont 12 students. Folks, could you give Joan a round of applause for coming from New York and revisiting our history here in Delaware and in Claymont. Today we remember the moment 70 years ago in living memory when the building right behind me, the then Claymont High School, was integrated. And for some of the students here today, it may be hard to understand or remember exactly why this was a big deal. And one of the things, I will be kind about this, but one of the things about Joan is she is so gracious and so positive that you could get the mistaken impression that all of this just happened easily. And it may be the case that here in Claymont, more than not, it happened without terrible incidents. But the reason that the races, black and white, were divided in school here in Delaware was it was in the Delaware Constitution. And the reason there was racial segregation here in Delaware was our nation's founding sin. The moral stain of slavery was a foundational part of the state of Delaware and of our nation. In fact, we've started celebrating as a national holiday Juneteenth, the day in June that slaves in Texas became aware that they'd been freed through the Emancipation Proclamation. Delaware actually did not ratify the 13th Amendment ending slavery until 6 months later. This was a state dragged kicking and screaming out of its deep history of racial division and ugliness. But we can, and today we are proud of the role that Claymont played, and also Hockessin played, in a positive chapter in a story that nationally did not unfold quite so easily. So what you heard was the story of how Ms. Anderson and these other students became a part of a lawsuit. I want to tell you for a minute about those lawyers. I am a lawyer, so I'm particularly fond of crusading lawyers. There was a lawyer from Wilmington, Delaware, named Lewis L. Redding, and the city-county building's named for him. He was the first black lawyer in the history of Delaware, which says something. And he had teamed up with two men, Thurgood Marshall and Jack Greenberg of the NAACP. Now, the NAACP nationwide was testing, was filing lawsuits in Kansas, in South Carolina, in Virginia, in Washington, D.C., and yes, here in Delaware, to push back against this decades-old, centuries-old history of racial oppression. And they came here and filed this suit. And compared to other places in the country, the suit relatively peacefully proceeded because the Claymont School Board and school superintendent and the then Chancellor Seitz and the Supreme Court embraced voluntary integration. But let's be clear, you may have heard in Ms. Anderson's story, they were breaking the law. The Delaware Constitution said the races should be educated separately. That's why the only high school for black students was all the way down in Wilmington. And if you lived right over here, you had to go all the way to Wilmington. There was another case from Hockessin where a little girl had to walk 2 miles to get to elementary school every day. even though the school bus full of white kids went right past her house. And her mom also filed a lawsuit saying, please just let the bus stop and pick up my child. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case called Plessy v. Ferguson, an obscenity from the 19th century, that talked about separate but equal. That's the way they squared the circle of the 14th Amendment adopted after the Civil War that said we're all entitled to equal protection under the law. Plessy v. Ferguson came up with the fiction that these schools were separate but equal. All it took was eyes. C.J. Seitz, the chancellor, got in his car, drove out to Hockessin in one case, drove up to Claymont in another case, and as you heard in the sections read by the students, he just looked. He looked at Howard High School and he looked at Claymont High School. He looked at the Hockessin so-called colored school number 107, and he looked at the white school up on the hill. And he said, these aren't equal. Don't have the same books, don't have the same facilities, don't have the same teachers. There is pride and value in the history of the students who went to schools like Hockessin School 107. But in terms of the resources available for education and transportation, they weren't even close. So one of the things we celebrate today is the bravery of a whole group of people, students, teachers, lawyers, advocates, who called clearly something that had been going on for far too long. Now, lest you think this was easy everywhere, I also had a chance through a friend of mine, a man named John Lewis, who was a U.S. congressman, to go meet someone named Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges, at just about the same time, was an elementary school student who walked into her school in Louisiana. And unlike the story here in Delaware, she only made it into that school because there were members of the National Guard with guns, there were federal marshals, and there was a painting in the White House. When Barack Obama became president, he put the original painting from Norman Rockwell. Some of the grown-ups here know this one. And there's a picture of her with her head held high, with tomatoes and racial slurs on the wall behind her. And President Obama was always struck by the fact that we chose to have children be the ones who bore the brunt and the challenge of integration of our schools. Miss Ruby Bridges, who's also still alive and speaks regularly in the South and is trying to restore the school that she helped integrate, was a fierce young woman with courage and determination. And so is Miss Anderson. Let me close by saying this. I had the blessing in law school to be taught by a man named Burke Marshall. Burke Marshall was the person President Kennedy sent to Alabama when George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, refused to integrate after Brown versus Board. Remember, he stood in the schoolhouse door. Literally, the governor of the state said, I refuse to let black and white students live together. Burke Marshall was appointed by President Kennedy to go down there and get him out of the door and make a way out of no way. He was my professor in law school. And knowing I was from Delaware, he said, well, of course, this student knows the history of Belton versus Gephardt and Beulah versus Gephardt. I'd never heard it. This had never been taught in my elementary school, my middle school, my high school. I did not know our history. And when a guy named Joe Biden moved to Delaware to Claymont, he moved right there. His neighborhood was just right down at the end of this street when he first moved to Delaware. And one of the great blessings of this last year has been a chance. Ms. Anderson and I were in the Oval Office with our president as he signed into law a bill that Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester and Senator Carper and I co-sponsored, and my dear friend Jim Clyburn, a congressman from South Carolina, moved through the House and the Senate. And because of that law, now signed into law by President Biden, this site and the school in Hockessin are a part of the Brown versus Board National Historic Site. That was a lot of history, but there's a simple lesson for our elementary school students in this. People will divide us if we let them. People will deny us history if we let them. There is a beautiful chapter to American history right here in Claymont. And Ms. Anderson has shared that with us today. If we choose to embrace each other, if we choose to live together, if we choose to see in each other citizens, children of God, folks who belong in our community, people we like and we want to be next to and be neighbors with, regardless of your perspective or worldview, if we would open our hearts to each other, we will have a stronger, more vibrant, more just, more democratic society. But that begins by knowing our history. And with the platform of that history, we can continue to make change together. So to members of our General Assembly, to the leadership of Claymont Community Center, and to the students from Claymont Elementary, thank you for your amazing attention this morning. I know we have many more speakers, but I appreciate you listening. And Allison, thank you for the privilege of the platform today.
Clearly, our speakers were just fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Coons. So at the local level, the Claymont Center has a tremendous amount of support from our local elected officials. I am really thrilled to call up to the podium Senator Sarah McBride, Senator Kyle Evans-Gay, and Representative Larry Lambert.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm so inspired right now. Our time is short, so I'll keep it brief. I'm so honored to meet Miss Joan Anderson. Thank you for your bravery, for your courage. It's because of you I stand on your shoulders as the first African American elected locally here in Claymont. I want to thank Senator Coons for making sure Claymont was recognized nationally. I want to thank my wonderful colleagues in the General Assembly, and I want to thank everyone for coming out. Racial justice is not a destination, it's a journey. We are proud of the progress we've made in the last 70 years, but we also have a long way to go. And our future is bright with wonderful young people like you. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for learning your history, and thank you for celebrating this wonderful day.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah McBride. I am proud to represent the 1st Senate District, which currently includes the Claymont Community Center. And I'm proud to stand alongside my colleagues, Representative Larry Lambert, who has about the biggest heart in the Delaware General Assembly and has Claymont right at the center of it. And as we have seen and heard today, Claymont has quite a heart itself. I'm thrilled to serve alongside my colleague, Senator Kyle Evans-Gay, who represents the 5th District, which will soon include this sacred spot. It is a privilege to join you all, to join Ms. Anderson, to join Senator Coons, to join the students of Claymont Elementary School, and to join the staff of the Claymont Community Center, which is upholding every single day the lessons of this anniversary. That when you combine the vibrant diversity of this community together in a facility, anything is possible. The sky is the limit, and we can grow and inspire and empower a community. On this 70th anniversary, I am reminded of the awesome impact that individual acts of courage and of hope and of kindness can have. That individual actions can lead to collective change. I'm reminded as we hear these stories that the greatness in the story of our state and our country lies not in some mythical perfection of the past, but rather in those who behind us fought to build a better future. And I think today, as Senator Coons alluded to, as we mark this 70th anniversary, we must all be reminded of both the moral and civic responsibility and obligation we have to identify the moral blind spots of our society today, to right wrongs, to address injustice, to have a little bit of courage so that no one has to be a hero, and to improve this community, and in so doing, just like the Claymont 12, help change this nation. So thank you all for being here, and it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to my partner in progress every single day and my partner in purple today, Senator Kyle Evans-Gay.
Thank
Thank you so much, and I'd like to invite Allison up. I have the distinct honor to present to you a tribute today from the General Assembly. We can open that up. There we go. And thank you. And I want to thank my colleagues and thank everyone here for inviting me into your community. As Senator McBride stated, I work next door right now, but moving forward, I get to be so much more embedded in all the great work you do here. I have been spending more time in this community, and every time I drive by this building, I feel chills. Because like Senator Coons, I am a lawyer and a student of history. And one of the idols I look up to is Lewis L. Redding. And it's important to remember that he, for nearly a quarter century, was the only non-white member of our bar. And on his shoulders, he took on all of the work to make the progress that his community needed of him. And so thinking about him and thinking about our then Vice Chancellor, I want to read just an excerpt of this. It says, "Rarely, if ever, has Delaware been more blessed to have the right persons in the right places at the right times than we were in 1952 when the Delaware Court of Chancery took up the matter of equality in public education." And so what I would say to the students today is, remember, you have the power to be the right person in the right place. And whether you find yourselves sitting on a beautiful day, getting a couple of minutes out of school, or in your communities, be what the change that you want to see. Because just like Miss Anderson and her family, who had the courage to stand up, and like Mr. Redding, and like Vice Chancellor Seitz, you, every one of you, has the power to make your community what you wish it to be. And remember that we, and all of us, are here to help you. So thank you for having us today, and thank you for the honor to be with you.
Okay. So I have been doing a great job of holding it together, but I am going to ask the Claymont Elementary School 5th grade chorus to come up. They have been practicing a song since school started, and that was only, 2.5, 3 weeks ago. But they are going to sing. Their performance is Lift Every Voice and Sing. We will give them a big round of applause. We have to get a little louder for them. Great job. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm gonna close us out here. While it wasn't perfect, the Claymont integration was peaceful and remains an important part of the Delaware story. There are so many people to recognize for what happened back then. Notably, the members of the Claymont Public Schools Board, including Sager Tryon, who actually later was a founding member of the Claymont Community Center. They did what was morally right, and they were courageous. I've also interviewed Mirtha Trotter, who was one of the Claymont 12. Unfortunately, she couldn't be with us. But she said this. She pointed out the bravery of her parents. She said, our parents should be honored for fighting for their children. They were the ones that got the ball rolling. So many people were part of this story. Celebrations like this honor their memory and their contributions and inspire us to keep working towards a more just society. Claymont High School is now home to the Claymont Community Center, an anchor in the community for over 45 years. This legacy of inclusion and diversity is central to our mission to enhance the community by addressing the human needs of wellness, belongingness, and esteem. We provide educational, recreational, and social supports to all people, and all people are welcome here. We are proud to be one of the cases cited in Brown versus the Board of Education, and even more thrilled now to be an affiliate of the National Park in Topeka, Kansas. We stand proudly with Howard High School and Hockessin School 107. We're a family now. That's what we said. We understand the importance of being part of the larger conversation to recognize the contributions Claymont High School has made to end separate but equal education. I want to thank the Claymont team, especially Debbie and Jeff, who always get me through events like this. Harry and Pete are facility guys. They make everything look wonderful. Special thanks to the students and staff of Claymont Elementary for being here with us. The principal, Tammy's Miss Stewart. Tammy's the principal of Claymont Elementary and also one of our board members. Thank you, all to our speakers, especially Joan. Joan makes this story come alive, and there's really nothing more than that. Please head inside. If you haven't been here, it's spectacular inside. We have murals from the 1930s. We have memorabilia. We've got a lot of great stuff. We have refreshments. So thank you again, all of